Good morning, my fellow obsessors, and thank you for being here with us this morning at 10 o'clock for our 10 o'clock show, which is very handy that it's 10 o'clock. I'm joined by the very interesting Neil Butler, who's going to talk to us about something that has captured my imagination, and I'm really interested to know more. Neil, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Annette. It seemed only fair. You came and joined me on a podcast the other day, and it seemed fair that I should come and say hello to you.
I did, and like your podcast is really cool because it just asks questions that I've not normally been asked. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. So it's a bit quid pro quo here, but without the Chianti.
That's it, and with visual, whereas on the podcast you don't get to see why I've got a head for radio.
No, that's right. Well, and you didn't get to see that I was sitting underneath an abandoned house.
Oh, okay.
Because I was trying to find somewhere really quiet to talk. It's kind of funny. I'm wandering around this backyard going, oh, I really hope no one lives here.
Yeah.
So your thing, the thing that like fires you up the most, your obsession, is called Transformagination. And I practiced that a few times before we spoke. Can you tell me what that is and like, is it a word you made up or is it something that has been around for a while and I missed it?
It's a word I made up earlier this year. As things have turned out, it's an ideal circumstance for what we're going through at the moment because transformagination is where transformation meets imagination. So it came out of a conversation. Often the best conversations are accompanied by a couple of cool drinks on a warm afternoon. And we were sitting in a work context and we were saying, if we were to start again running our business, how would we start it? Because unfortunately, what tends to happen, and this is obviously from a business perspective, we'll talk about how this might impact on individuals shortly. But from a business perspective, if we're going to try and transform our business, we often start with a legacy position. I call it hanging onto the ladder. You'll never learn to swim if you continue to hold on to that ladder. So what we talked about doing was saying, forget the ladder. Let's get out there and identify what the ultimate looks like. So in the case of what I was working in, there was a business model that wasn't working. And we were saying, if we were to start again, how different would it be to where we are now? Find what that ultimate utopia thing is, and then work out how we get there. Rather than saying, where are we now? Where can we get to from here? Where can we get to from here? I guess, everyone likes to talk about a journey. Let's talk about a journey for a moment.
Journeys are good.
If I say to you, I want to drive 1 hour from where I am at the moment, and I bet you can't guess where I am at the moment, he said with the poster over his shoulder, I might get to Melbourne, I might get to Ballarat, I might get to Colac, but what I will get to is somewhere else where I can then say, well, where do I go from here? Whereas if I said, no, I want to go to the Gold Coast, how do I get to the Gold Coast? It's about understanding where I need to get to, and then we can say, how do we get there? So that's really where the Transformagination thing came out. It's also allowed me to invent a verb, which is transformaginate, and an adjective, which is transformaginative thinking. So it's a word that has kind of evolved over the last 2 or 3 months in that context. There is a lady in the UK who uses Transformagination as her business name for personal development, but I tend to use it in the context of business. So that's
maybe we can work and it can become the word of the year. Every year they come out with the word of the year, so we need to get everyone to start using Transformagination right now. That is your sacred duty. That this is my goal for this year. So what you're saying is Transformagination means starting with your goals and where you want to go. So is it a bit like Stephen Covey's start with the end in mind?
Yeah, and I tend to avoid using other authors, speakers and stuff, partially because I'm concerned if I start reading too much of what they've done, I'm going to think, hang on, was that my idea? One of the greats, and you'll see over that shoulder, if you've got really good eyes, a copy of Abbey Road. And that's, I've put a few things behind me that sort of speak a little bit about my life and stuff as a subtle background. Paul McCartney once went round to his friend's house and said, have you ever heard this song before? And played this piece of music, and they said no. And he said, good, okay, I must have written it then. It's called Yesterday. Now, if you get someone like the great Paul McCartney who's worried about plagiarising work from people, that's why I tend to steer clear of the Stephen Coveys. Not that he's got nothing good to say. That's why I tend not to quote them too much. But I think end goals are always a really good spot to start, because if you don't know where you're going, if I said to you, righto, Annette, let's get in the car, let's drive somewhere. we could drive around in circles and get back where we were. We could end up in a really good place. We could end up in a really bad place. It's really about identifying where you want to be and then working out how you get there. No one ever goes on holidays and says, I'm going to go down to Brisbane International Airport and jump on a plane. They say, I'm going to Europe, or I'm going to, Perth, or I'm going somewhere. So without an end goal in place, your journey is always going to be all over the place. So that's kind of where I'm trying to get to. And that could be on a personal level. It could be on a business level as well.
So how important, I'm going to take this a step back. So I've got 2 teenage sons, and I can remember when they were little and I'd say, just go outside and play. And they go, but what are we going to do? And I go, use your imagination. And they're like, my eldest son, who's a smart ass, goes, I don't have one, Mum. Are we losing our imagination because we're being fed so much information that we don't have space anymore to be creative and imaginative?
Potentially. I think it was the great Albert Einstein. I'm a physicist as well. That's one of the things that I studied at uni. So technically I can call myself a physicist. Albert Einstein, the great philosopher, said imagination is more important than knowledge. And sometimes you just need to sit and think. And I think that bit's going because, as you say, social media is pushing in our face. I was sitting here this morning thinking social media is a really interesting environment. For example, we're all based in Australia, those of us who I'm referring to in this conversation. The number of people on social media at the moment with a really strong opinion about Donald Trump and a really strong opinion about Jacinda Ardern and really strong opinion about a whole stack of things going overseas. And they have got, I don't know why they're saying it. I mean, what impacts are going to have? Am I going to go, oh, okay, well, in that case, I will definitely vote for Jacinda Ardern, or am I definitely going to vote for Donald Trump? I'm just getting this stuff thrown at me that's completely irrelevant to my day-to-day life. If I could clear out some of that stuff and start saying, let's think about what could be. One of the taglines for Transformagination is, there are no limits. When someone says you can't do that, say, no, sorry, you can. I can't remember who it was that said to me, I'm going to find out the person who invented apostrophe T and really do some damage to them, because can becomes can't, do becomes don't, will becomes won't. And if you start taking away the apostrophe T's, there are no limits. You know that saying, the sky's the limit? I don't think the folks at NASA believe that.
No, imagine if they had of. We would have not had all the amazing discoveries that we've had.
Absolutely. So it's about saying, what could I do, not should I do. My previous contract, I was working with one of the big 4 banks. And there's lots of people running around at the moment saying, oh, we should do this. When we get back, we should do this. When we get back, we should do that. Well, should by definition says you've got some kind of magical code that you need to meet. There's a set of expected behaviours. No, blow that out of the water. Let's start thinking about could. What could we do when we get back? What could we do to redefine our business? What could we do as a person trying to change the way they are? There's again, I'm going to quote another physicist, Isaac Newton, who said, something will keep going in the same direction at the same speed unless it's acted upon by an external force. Well, that means that if we don't do anything different today, tomorrow will be the same, and the next day, and next week, and next month. Unless you start saying, where am I getting to? What am I trying to achieve? Where am I going? I'm going to be doing the same thing tomorrow. And the day after.
Who wants to do this? A little bit like, when you're trying to solve a problem with your current thinking, like you just keep going round and round in circles.
Yep.
So when you're engaging now I can't say it. I've said it so many times. Transformagination.
Yep.
When you're employing that, does your comfort zone get in the way of being able to use transformation and imagination to get to your goal?
Absolutely it does. And one of the sayings I hate the most, step out of your comfort zone. I hate it. And the reason I hate it, and people are going, oh, hang on, that's controversial. Suppose I'm sitting in my lounge room here, and if I step out of the lounge room, I'm on the back veranda. One step, and I'm back in the lounge room. If I take a flying leap out of my comfort zone, then it takes me a lot of steps to go back there. And sometimes I think to myself, actually, what, I'm out on the back lawn now. I quite like it out here. So if you step out of your comfort zone, that's a great starting point. But it's really easy to go, oh, hang on a minute, that's a bit tricky. I'll step back into it. And unfortunately, a lot of people do that. They'll go, I'm going to be really brave. You walk down to the beach, probably not where you live, near where I live, you stick your toe in the water and you go, oh, that's cold, I'm not getting in. where you live, stick your toe in the water and go, well, that's quite nice.
Oh, no, it's still cold. It's all relative, Neil.
Isn't it? Yeah. Who's got cold relatives? That's not a very nice thing to say, but I think it's really important that if you're going to be fair income about, there's a good Australian phrase, fair income, about transformagination, you can't afford to step out of your comfort zone. No one has ever seen hello, Hayley. No one has ever said, I'm going to parachute, and then hang by a rope and dangle themselves down out of the aeroplane. No one has ever bungee jumped by shimmying down the rope.
I just had a visual.
Now, I should do a comment at the moment that I've never been bungee jumping, nor have I ever parachuted. Neither will I unless they throw me out of an aeroplane, because I'm scared of heights. But I just think, and this is not easy. I'm not saying for a moment everyone should just now go, okay, I'll just jump out of my comfort zone. But until you start pushing the boundaries, you'll never know where those boundaries are. Have you seen the film The Truman Show?
The Truman Show?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, my son just watched it recently. I sat there and I kind of went, I've seen this, and I got drawn in and went, what a brilliant film.
We won't spoil it for people, but until he pushes his boundaries, he doesn't know where those boundaries are.
Why do you think that we get so by the very nature, boundaries are something that are meant to constrain us and hold us in and keep us in line. Where along the way did we just go, oh, well, we're just going to accept this as status quo and just keep those nice, safe boundaries around us?
I think it's the equivalent of jumping under the doona on a cold night. It's a nice, comfortable spot to be. And I'm kind to, hello, Naomi. I think that it's, Naomi was on our pod too. He said,
she's awesome.
Shamelessly throwing a plug in for his podcast. But I think you get under that doona, and if you don't stick your toe out on a cold morning, you're going to stay there because it's nice. And I'll get up tomorrow, or I'll get up the day after. And people who have, for example, depression, that's an area that people really struggle with. They can't get out of bed. So it's those sorts of little steps, sure, are really important depending upon where you are in your journey. But I think if we accept them and we go, I'm never stepping outside of where I feel comfortable, life's going to be pretty beige.
Oh, yeah. And if you love Billy Connolly, you know how much he loves beige.
Yes. Beige.
Beige. Not at all. Beige. I was in my beige pants walking around the bush.
So it's an area, and again, it's really easy for extroverts to be able to go, I'm happy to go out there and do stuff and bounce off people and step out. And there are introverts at the moment who are currently crawling back in under their doona going, who is this bloke and why is he making me think like this? And until someone makes that challenge, it's going to be an issue for each person. If they're unhappy in their current circumstances, you've got to do something to change it.
We get stuck, don't we? It's like you've just said, nobody wants to get out from under the warm doona when it's cold outside. But what happens, because there's more introverts in the world than there are extroverts. Now, let's face it, the extroverts are the ones that kind of keep, pulling us on and are the shining lights. We're going, oh, my goodness, why can't I be like them? With so many introverts in the world, how do we ever get things done? Because we're all hiding under our doonas. That's
it. And interestingly, and people will go, yeah, right. I've actually been assessed as being a massive introvert. So it's really quite odd because people go, no, you're really outgoing. Very different thing. But I think the question of relative comfort zones, as Naomi put the comment up before, about finding out what your discomfort zone is a really good observation. Because I think, my comfort zone might be 5% of around my world. For other people, their comfort zone might be 30%. So to get to 6% in the first case is getting outside your comfort zone. For other people, they might need to go to 35% or whatever that magic number is. So I think it's relative. So I'm not suggesting that someone who struggles to metaphorically step onto the back veranda is now about to go out and take on the world. But if they can step onto their back veranda and then out into the front street of their house, then they've got well outside of their comfort zone. So not everyone can do what you're doing, what other people are doing, but you've got to make an effort to transformaginate yourself. If you are unhappy in your current circumstances, if you're happy doing what you're doing, do what you're doing. I'm not going to come around knocking your door and say, get out and transformaginate. But it's all about...
That needs to be on a T-shirt, Neil. I transformaginated myself. Like, what a great conversation starter.
If only I knew a PR person as well, we may sit down and do something about that. So I need to find someone to be on my podcast, someone to be in Queensland, someone to, okay, I've got a list of things, people I need to talk to today.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. That's me. I'm all about helping people get work, get things done. My job here is done. I'm going home now. Oh, I am home. What am I talking about?
Yes,
so right, you were saying before, like we were talking about introverts and extroverts, is when you referred, you don't compare what you're doing, you don't look at your competitors, as that would be really important in the just totally. I hope we're going to do a bloopers on this, because that was a massive blooper, wasn't it?
Yeah. When
we're doing that, it's important not to compare with other people about going, well, look at that extrovert there. Not that we refer to people that way, but that person's now gone and created blah, 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 blah. There's no way I can do that. Instead, what we should be looking at is going, what can I do? Doesn't matter what other people think.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important part. It's all about relative, and we've talked about my relatives already, haven't we? It's all about your relative position.
Very cold.
Apparently so. But I think the transformagination process is very much, whether I'm talking at a company level or I'm talking at an individual level, it's about saying, I don't care what other people are doing. I need to be where I need to be. Really good example of this, in the 90s, I worked for a reasonably large company. We won't name them. Their stated policy was they always wanted to be number 2. Now, apart from anything else, that means they're never going to transformaginate, because they're always following the one that was number 1 in the market. There were 4 or 5 big, that wasn't banking, by the way, 4 or 5 big players in the market, and they said we want to be number 2. So when number 1 went off and did something, they followed them and did the same thing. Someone's doing the dishes.
Yeah, someone's doing the dishes while I'm doing a Facebook Live. This is the joy of isolation.
Isn't it though?
Yeah. Well, my office sits in, we've got an open plan. So my kitchen is like maybe 5 meters away. So I have a young son who's now doing the dishes and contemplating it. I'm amazed to see him at 10 o'clock. It's very, very early for him to be up. I've got a good question here from Naomi. Do you think that being an expert can be an excuse for staying in your comfort zone?
We don't like excuses.
No excuses.
No excuses. No limits. No excuses. Yeah, I guess if I was an alleged expert in an area of I guess what I'd be trying to do is take that and push it further. So yes, you can stay in your comfort zone, but that's not growing you. I mean, it's about personal growth as well. It's about saying, if I look at where I was 5 years ago and compare where I am now, how different am I now? Now, some people would say, no, you're still the same old girl I used to be, Daryl Cotton, 1980. Or I could be, others would say, wow, you're so different. You've done this, you've done that, you've moved to Geelong. So I think it's all, again, how people perceive it. But I think as an expert, you almost have a responsibility to push those boundaries, to take that expertise in an area where others are not prepared to go to.
Oh, because what a great way to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how did you come up with this? I mean, you said that you have studied physics.
Yep.
So where did you go, you know what, I'm going to come up with a new word and a new way of being?
Where did it all go wrong, you mean?
No, never.
I was a school teacher for 5 years, and after that period of time, I thought there's got to be more to life than doing this. Not because there's anything wrong with teachers. My daughter's a teacher. I absolutely think the sun shines out of them, so I'm not having a crack. But it wasn't for me. I had gone as far as I could go, and during a 5-year teaching career, so I stuck my toe in the corporate world and went out and started doing some training in the corporate world. And to show how old I am, I introduced 2 new products to a very large global company. One was a thing called electronic mail, and the other one was called personal computing word processing. So this is approximately the same time as Newton was finding gravity. So I'm actually 273 years old. But I went into that organisation.
Really good.
Thank you very much.
Must be the oil of Ulan that you use.
It must be that, or the great life of living near the seaside. But it could be, I went in there and I thought, no, there's more to this than just going in and standing in front of a group of people and saying, you then click on the send button. So I started getting involved in projects, And gradually over time, I noticed a lot of what I would call the should-bes coming through. We should be doing this, we should be doing that. And consulting companies, if ever you want to insult me, call me a consultant, because consulting companies, broadly speaking, hashtag allegedly, often are there to sell you the next piece of work. So what they're doing is going in and pulling something off the shelf and saying, this is how you should do it. Well, the old one size fits all doesn't actually work. And in fact, one of my mantras is one size fits one. And one size, if you're lucky, might fit a few, whatever that translates to. But, you know, I just think that we've got to get to a stage where individuals and their ability to make an impact is allowed. And instead of saying, oh, we shouldn't be doing that because our competitor's not doing it, or we shouldn't be doing that because we'll stand out of the crowd, or we shouldn't, we could be doing this. We could be doing that. And whether that's an individual or whether that's a business, it doesn't really matter. So over a period of time, I've gradually become more and more disenchanted with people trying to be the same. One of the great mysteries to me is the concept of diversity. Now, you go into a large organization and someone's running around beating their chest saying, I'm the diversity officer. Now, there's some really easy messages and measures you can use on the diversity scale, you know, gender, disability, age. But what about thinking styles? What about personalities? Those sorts of diversities. You can't measure those. So you end up with businesses running around saying, there's a great line. I was trying to work out how I'd bring this in. I think I've just found out. Life of Brian. I think it's Life of Brian. One of those Monty Python films where a whole stack of people are standing there going, we are all individuals. Yes, we are all individuals. And one bloke pipes up and goes, well, I'm not. And, you know, it's the irony component of that you think, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. So what you find is that businesses, they call it company culture. What it actually means is bringing a whole stack of constraints in so everyone thinks the same way. And I've also got a measure that's what I call the senior manager laughing test. When a senior manager stands up at a town hall presentation, whatever, always starts off with a horrifically feeble joke. And everyone sits there laughing, slapping their thigh. It's the funniest thing they've ever heard. That's it. As your senior manager has walked in and told a joke. Meanwhile, Jack or Sally from accounts payable gets up and delivers the best one-liner. Everyone goes, yeah, it's this whole, we must think, we must bow, we must worship to the one sitting at the top of the organogram. And it's killing diversity. It's killing creative thinking. And what I think post-COVID-19, because this is the middle of May, in case people are looking at this later on, what we're finding is we will find that the olden day measures of age, tenure, industry experience, grey hair, maleness, that used to be the things that were driving seniority in a business will be replaced by innovative thinking, creativity, preparedness to take a risk, agility, flexibility, adaptability, all those sorts of things that could be a person in their second year in work, or it could be the person in their 62nd year of work. It doesn't matter, but different things will start getting businesses going. The more creativity and non-diversity that we have, proper diversity that we have, so much better and so much easier than Transformaginate.
I love that. I need to give you my line from Life of Brian. I don't know how it fits in, but this is my favourite. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. And that's kind of like, I think that sums up, a way that a lot of organisations look at what you're talking about, diversity, is that they think that they know everything, but they actually really don't at all. And, I asked a question the other day, what type of subjects would you like to see in schools? Okay, maths, reading, that's, that kind of good basics. But it was incredible the number of people who were talking about, resilience, emotional intelligence, all of those soft skills that I've worked in many corporate organizations where, the senior manager kind of turns their nose up when you go, well, perhaps we could do something on this. And they bring in another boring corporate speaker and you're like going,
absolutely.
Wish I'd had a mobile phone back then.
Well, one of the really interesting things I find is the organisation I was working with most recently as a client, they have 3 major buildings in Melbourne and this sort of outpost. And I was working in the outpost, and the word came out that the chief customer officer was going to come for a visit in 3 weeks.
Sounds very officious.
I get that he's busy. I get that 3 weeks. But immediately what happened was the edict went out. Right, when he turns up, we want all our desks need to be tidied. All of the, take down the posters off the wall. And my boss said, I reckon if I were you, Neil, I'd have a meeting in a different office. And I said, what? And he goes, I don't know that he's going to appreciate your style. Now, a senior manager in the organisation. Right?
It sounded like an insult.
Yeah. So he was whisked past my desk, I think somewhat intentionally, and my boss was walking behind the group and just winked at me and smiled. Anyway, as fate would have it, I was leaving the building and walking through the foyer, and he was there. And he goes, "G'day, mate. I didn't see you in there." And I said, "No." He said, "What do you do?" And I said, we had a chat about what I did. And he goes, "Yeah, I think we must chat again sometime. You got some really interesting ideas." So it was almost like, don't let him see Neil, whatever you do, because he might actually say what he means.
He's the ugly stepsister in the corner.
No question in terms of the ugly component. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. That wasn't. Okay, yeah, I did mean it. No, I didn't.
Radio and podcasts, you see, that's why it is.
Oh, I think you're underselling yourself there. There's a really cool comment here from Rika. Her father was a physicist, and he stepped out by writing books for children to make science interesting. How cool is that? Like taking your expertise and turning it into, something that is imaginative and creative, and not that physics isn't imaginative and creative, but being able to make it more palatable for different audiences.
Absolutely. Now, you go back to Julius Sumner Miller in the 60s, one of the great physicists.
Loved him.
And he must have been ridiculed within an inch of his life by his colleagues about going and making physics accessible. Our callers there, whose name has disappeared off the screen, so I'm sorry about that. Imagine her dad going in and saying, we're going to do is start writing children's books. But that is really, Rika, that's really stepping outside of your comfort zone. And now there's probably 20, 50, 100, 200, 5,000 kids who are now more engaged in the world of science and technology than otherwise would have been. Great outcome. Yeah. Love it.
It is a great outcome. So how do people tap into Transformagination? Like, is it something that they need to go and study, or they look at what they're doing and, like, you defined it really beautifully, that it's about starting with your goals and dreams and working back from there. Is it really that simple?
I think it is. And this is the other thing. We have made things so complex that, change management's an area I've worked in. There's a process called the ProSci process. Now, you go and do a 3-day course on change management and come out the other end. Now, if you've never done change management, okay, it's probably worthwhile doing. Here's change management. Where are we now? Where do we have to get to? How do we get there? How do we make it stick? I've just done it in 5 seconds, not 3 days. Because there's this complexity. I worked in an organisation where I sat down in a meeting for an hour with a group of people to determine whether or not we had the right shade of blue in the headings.
It's like, oh my God.
If we're talking about marketing materials and the brand, I get it, but this is an internal document. People have put so much complexity into it. This is simple stuff. This is about saying, have no constraints in your thinking, get out and do stuff. There you go. There's the definition of it.
Oh, that's awesome. Neil, look, it's been really awesome talking to you. If you've just tuned in, we're about to wrap up, so too bad, too sad you missed it, unless you watch the replay. Neil Butler is... Sorry?
Is there replays? Wow.
Well, this goes onto YouTube.
Oh, that's a relief. I don't have to say it all again.
No, well, yeah, and word for word. I would hold you to word
I've got to go
back
and study it now.
Yeah, so like all of that genius that came out of your mouth, it's like, huh? No, I've forgotten. So Neil is the creator, the founder, the inventor of Transformagination, which is a blending of transformation and imagination. Wow. He's a podcaster and he's not a consultant, so don't call him that.
I'm a transformaginist.
He's a transformaginist. It kind of sounds a little bit kinky.
Hashtag just saying.
Just saying. Neil, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for being having me.
Absolutely. And go and transformaginate.
Can I say transformagination.co as a good website to look at?
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. I think it's a fascinating topic. And anybody who wants to know a little bit more, by all means, transformaginate.co and go and check it out and have a chat with me.
Transformagination.co.
Shun.
Thanks,
there you
Anna.
go. Did you get that? Shun. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you at 1:00.
See you, everyone.